Welcome to Lit with Lloyd. I am your host, Lloyd. And today, thanks to KCAT TV and radio, we will be talking with Ellen Kirschman, and who has written a whole bunch of fiction and nonfiction. We're going to find out about that. And we're also going to be finding out why they call her Cop Doc. So welcome. Thank you for coming to our podcast.
Very happy to be here.
Okay, let's start with Cop Doc. Where does that come from?
Well, I have been a police and public safety psychologist for 40 years.
Wow.
Before I had any gray hair at all. And most of the first responders I work with just call me Doc. So I became the Cop Doc, and that's sort of my handle or my brand.
What made you, first of all, become a psychologist, and secondly, focus on public safety organizations?
That is such a long answer to that question.
We got lots of time.
All right. I was working as a clinical social worker in a psychiatric clinic and many years ago, and I began to hear stories from police officers' wives. At that time, there really weren't all that many women in law enforcement. And I began to hear about how this job was spilling over to the family and being very destructive of family life. And, you know, I would say what every other clinician would say, well, bring your husband in. And as soon as I said that, not only would the husband not come anywhere near a psychiatric clinic, I lost the wife as well. She wouldn't come back. So I began to think about what was it? What was this stigma? What was this fear about mental health? And at that time, we're talking now late 70s, mental health was really very stigmatized, much more than it is today. So I had this idea in my head. I was slightly bored with what I was doing also, day in and day out. And I put together a class called I Love a Cop. And I brought it up to the local community college, Kenyatta College, and they thought it was a great idea. We put it on in the first day that the class catalog went out. We had 40 women sign up, and we had the class entirely filled and 40 women on the waiting list.
Oh my gosh.
So I knew I'd hit a need.
Wow.
And that sent me back to school for my doctorate and to do more research and study into how does somebody who enters a field healthy, hearty, altruistic, wanting to make a difference in their community, wind up broken, and very often their families broken as well. So that sort of drove me to do a dissertation called Wounded Heroes. It was kind of a combination between Sigmund Freud and Mickey Spillane, because there's so many amazing stories when you work with law enforcement, and that really was something that interested me a lot. And then I just started getting work dealing with families, because at that time nobody else was doing that.
Wow. 40 years later,
yes.
Has the field expanded a lot? I mean, are there a lot of you now doing
Yes.
this?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about a lot of us. There's probably about, I'm going to guess, maybe about 500 across the United States, people who specialize in working with first responders. But there is a much greater recognition that first responders are human beings, that the job is incredibly stressful, that they need help, support, mental health help. The stigma is still there, I'm sad to say, but it has gotten less than it has been in the past. Many organizations, modern organizations with resources, will have mental health people on staff or available in the community, chaplain programs, stress reduction kinds of programs. There's all kinds of apps for people, and books. So it's much more common now. Of the people, the psychologists who deal with first responders, particularly law enforcement, I think the greatest majority of them do assessment, pre-employment screening, fitness for duty, that kind of thing. I am part of the group of people that we call ourselves interventionists, or we're clinicians. Yeah. We actually want to sit with the individuals and try to help sort out the issues that they're dealing with.
when you started 40 years ago, was there anybody else doing it in the area? Somebody that you could like basically talk to and find out what to do?
Not too many. There's in San Jose, since we're in that neighborhood, there was Mike Roberts, and Mike does assessment. He does not do clinical work, but he'd been around for a while. But no, I think you're sitting here with me, and I'm one of the pioneers.
Wow.
There were very few of us. A man named Al Benner, who was a police officer in San Francisco, and also a psychologist, pulled together a bunch of people he knew who were doing this, myself included. And we went to the FBI Academy, and that was in the 80s sometime. And that was sort of the beginning of professionalizing ourselves and getting together and being supportive. And now we have two major organizations for people who do this kind of work, and credentialing and special credentialing for people who work with law enforcement, because you need to be culturally competent. You need to understand the culture. You need to understand why cops do what they do, and how they feel about it. You can't just be a general practitioner and understand.
Yeah.
Which is why I wrote another book called Counseling Cops, What Clinicians Need to Know. And I wrote that with two of my colleagues, both of whom are retired cops and psychologists.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you make contact with the police forces that used you? Did they find out through your teaching at Cañada?
Yeah. They came after me.
Wow.
And then one place would tell another place, or one spouse would tell another spouse. And it just came about sort of organically.
Did you have any issues with male police officers having to talk to a female psychologist?
Not really. I know that certainly some women who do the same kind of work I do, other psychologists have had that trouble. I can think of just a few rather minor incidents where I felt it was not like I was being directly insulted or harassed in any way, but I had to stand up for other women who were, particularly women who were law enforcement officers themselves. Sometimes the only person to speak up for them would be me, because I could see when that was happening. I think I was treated really quite well, and I've had male graduate students that I was supervising who had a much harder time with the cops because there was a more competitive kind of vibe going on.
Wow. Okay. Well, I could actually see talking about this specific aspect of what you do forever, but I do want to talk a little bit about some of the authorship that you have. You've written a number of nonfiction books. You mentioned one, and you've written a fiction series about a psychologist who works with public safety organizations. Who could that possibly have been patterned on?
Well, when people ask me, are your books autobiographical? Did that really happen to you? Most of the time the answer is no, of course not. And if I did what Dot Meyerhoff, my fictional police psychologist, did, I would have lost my license many times. Plus, she's younger than I am. She's thinner than I am. She takes more risks than I ever would in my life. But I at a point after writing I Love a Cop, and then I Love a Firefighter, and I Love a Cop has 3 editions, I Love a Firefighter has 2.
Wow.
Those books have been really very useful, and I'm happy to say have a lot of readership. I sort of got tired with reality and decided, it's got to be easier to make stuff up. In fact, it is not easier to make stuff up. These are, probably as well as anybody, that those are 2 different skills, writing fiction and writing nonfiction. So I had a lot of fun writing the fiction Dot Meyerhoff Mysteries. It was a chance for a little payback for, as I always say, some cops who didn't treat me very well, a couple of my ex-husbands, some psychologists that I don't have a lot of respect for. So I really did have some fun. At the same time, I was trying to use those books as a vehicle to get behind the badge, to show the humanity, both the flawed and the admirable of the people that I've worked with. And many, I should say all four of my fiction books are inspired by something that actually happened or somebody I really found and I knew in my work.
Do you know if any of those fiction books have been inspiring for law enforcement people, public safety officers? Have you gotten any feedback from different people on the force?
Well, I don't know about on the force itself. I think there was a lottery in one department I worked with. I mean, I've worked with departments in 42 states and 4 different countries. But I know one particular department, they were betting on who some of my characters were modeled on. And of course, they're all composites, and I was very careful about all of that. But yes, I do get readers who write to me and say, I learned so much that I didn't know about what it takes to be a cop, or harder still, to be married to one, by reading your books. Well, I learned a lot about what a psychologist has to think about and consider when doing her work.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I feel like I've learned a lot from reading the Dot Meyerhoff books. I haven't read any of the nonfiction. I prefer fiction to nonfiction, although I've certainly read some of the other. But it is very instructive, which is really nice, as a reader, to learn something. How many nonfiction books did you write? And when you say, 3 editions of one, 2 of the other, are you the one making the changes on those editions?
Yes.
So it's almost like you're writing another book, almost.
Absolutely.
Because you have to go through every page, I would think, and make the changes that have changed.
You have to update things. I can't be talking about September 11th as a major incident, because there have been lots of other incidents following that. So you have to sort of become more current. Update current research, update current treatment techniques, things, because things have happened in the 20 years that the first. I mean, here's a fairly good example in my firefighter book, which I wrote the first edition of that 14 or so years ago, I think. I never mentioned wildfires in the book.
Interesting.
And now the whole world seems to have been on fire over these past couple of years. That was a whole entire new chapter that I had to research, interviewed people, and add to the book. So I'm married. I'm not married to a cop. I wrote a book called I Love a Cop, but I don't. I've never even had a date with a cop. I wrote I Love a Firefighter, and that would have been my brother, who was a volunteer firefighter for many years. But I am married to a retired remodeling contractor, and he says that it's so much easier to build a house from scratch than it is to remodel one. And so doing a revision of a book or an entirely new edition
is remodeling.
It's remodeling.
Wow.
And just like in construction, you break through a wall and you find something that shouldn't be there.
Yeah. What a great comparison.
It is.
All right, but let's get back to 42 states and 4 countries. I've known you for quite a few years.
Yes.
I never knew that you weren't just local.
Oh.
So what happens when you work with people from out of state? You go to the state, you spend a certain amount of time with them, and then tell us about the countries.
Okay. Well, I'm generally asked to come and do a workshop. That might be a workshop for first responder families. It might be something on self-care for cops. Might be meet with a group of clinicians who are trying to become culturally competent to work with this population. So I'll fly there. And the other countries, it's really been an honor and very exciting to go and see how policing is done elsewhere. And you'd be surprised at how much police officers have in common with each other around the world.
Wow.
So I've been to Singapore, I've been to Hong Kong twice, Canada, and the Czech Republic. And there was something we could all relate to in all of these different countries. Even the governments and the role of policing in those particular societies is different than it is here in the United States.
Wow. Are you still doing these workshops and tours?
Well, not since COVID.
Are you going to pick it up back again?
I don't know. I'm very invested in my writing. I have a novel, a standalone novel I've been working on. I'm not very eager to be hopping on a plane and traveling that much anymore.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can understand that.
I do.
Yeah, and my clinical work now is confined to something called the First Responders Support Network. That is a retreat for first responders who are suffering with the symptoms of post-traumatic injury. It's a 6-day retreat. We have some of the first responders and also some for we call the SOS program, the spouses, significant others and spouses program. So I do some of each. I do 4 a year. It's an incredibly effective and incredibly intense program, and I think we save lives. We save a lot of lives, and we save a lot of marriages.
Wow.
Very hard work. We only take 6 clients away. We have a facility up in the Napa Valley. We do 6 clients at once because it's so intense. We couldn't handle any more than that. We start at 8 in the morning, and I'm lucky if we're done at 10 o'clock at night. And we have several different ways that we approach people and their problems. But
Wow.
it's an amazing place. We've done over 1,000 first responders have graduated our program, and it's now in, I think, 4 different states.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a very quick break, and we shall be right back with Ellen Kirschman.
Thank you to the City of Montecirino for their continued support of KCAT Public Media. The City of Montecirino has enabled KCAT to inspire, educate, entertain, and inform our community through the magic of television and digital media for over 38 years. Thank you.
Okay, and we're back. So let's talk about your fictional series. How did you come up with the name of Dot Meyerhoff?
Well, it's a good story, I think. Dot is my mother's name. She was Dorothy, but everybody called her Dot. And Meyerhoff is my maternal grandmother's name. And she died before I was born, so I never met her. And I thought, well, this is a nice way to carry something forward into time. So I'm happy about that.
You know, in these interviews, lots of interesting stuff, but things like that are particularly interesting to me. You know, how names come about, because when I'm reading a book, I'm wondering how they come up with all these different names.
Sure.
Okay, so let's talk about Dot. You've written 4 books in the series. I have read them all. And you're going to be working on another one. But you're also talking about a standalone. First of all, when do you expect that it'll be finished?
Oh, you had to ask that question, didn't you? The revision, it's a very long book. It's the longest book I've written.
Okay.
And so I'm putting it I'm doing something I never do because I'm a very impatient person. I'm putting it in the drawer. I'm going to let it sit there. It's about my 4th revision of it. I'm going to let it sit there while I work on my next Dot Meyerhoff mystery. And the standalone with the provisional title is Call Me Carmela. was inspired by a real story I read in a newspaper that's been sort of haunting me ever since.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. That just sort of rolled right out, the whole story. It was great. And I can't predict, it has to be, my agent has to approve it, and then she has to try to sell it. I have started to self-publish my own mysteries, however.
You have? Okay,
Yes.
I was going to get to that.
Okay.
So all 4 of them are self-published? Mm-hmm. Okay. And you'll do the same thing with number 5?
Yes.
But you're actually going to try to sell the standalone when the time comes?
I think so. Yes, I think so, because I've needed so much help with marketing and promoting the 4 mysteries that really happens best in a series. With a single book, I think it's going to be much more difficult.
Yeah.
We'll see what my agent says.
Yeah. Are your nonfiction, are those self-published or are those with a publisher?
Those are traditional publishers at Guilford Press in New York. And I have to say that writing not just writing nonfiction is different from fiction, but marketing the books. I never have done a thing to market any of my nonfiction books, and the I Love a Cop has sold about 175,000 copies by now. So it's totally different in the world of fiction, and there isn't much crossover, which was a surprise.
Wow. Did you have to take writing classes to write fiction?
I have taken a couple of writing classes, a few. I think the best way to learn to write fiction is to read good fiction. That's what I learn. And sometimes I learn from reading bad fiction, too. I'm reading a very, very popular book right now. I will not say the title of it.
Because you don't like it.
It's right. It's won all sorts of awards, and the story's good, the writing is abysmal. I don't know how that happens.
I have read many books that were big hits, and it wasn't like I said they were poorly written or that I didn't like them. I thought, it's okay, and never read that author again. These are authors that have many highly successful books. So I'm kind of with you on that. And some of them are justified, of course. They're great books, and I can see why they're so popular. But I can certainly see where fiction is so different from nonfiction.
Right.
But am I right that the Dot Meyerhoff series is an award-winning series?
Yes, it's an award-winning series.
Let's hear about that award.
Well, it's gotten several awards, and I didn't know you were going to ask me that question, so I don't think I can remember them. I belong to something called the Public Safety Writers Association. Both nonfiction and my fiction books have gotten first place awards from them. And a short story I wrote last year, I've dabbled in that just a little bit. That got a first place from them, got an Indie Award. And most recently, I'm looking at the answer to his prayers. Some of my Dot Meyerhoff books were #1 sellers on Amazon Kindle.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. All right, so if you're self-publishing, how are you coming up with covers, and are they in audio?
No, they're not.
They're not.
Not in audio.
But they're obviously in print.
They are not yet in print. They are in ebooks, but I'm getting print books made soon. But right now they're only available as a Kindle books. And I don't do any of that work myself. I hired somebody who takes care of all of that for me, because my time, I'd be terrible at that. And my time is just better spent writing or reading.
Yeah. For those of us who read your stuff, keep writing and keep not worrying about all that other stuff.
Thank you.
Do you have one editor that goes through the book for you ahead of time, or do you have a group, early readers, any of that stuff?
Oh, I have early readers. Some of them are family members who happen also to be editors and writers themselves. I'm very lucky. I work with some other friends who are writers. There's a couple of us. I have been most recently, and this has been really a pleasant experience. The beginning of, November is the NaNoWriMo month. National Novel Writing Month. Yeah. So Sisters in Crime, the Northern California chapter, I'm a member of that, as well as Mystery Writers, Northern California chapter. We meet It started in November for NaNoWriMo, but we meet every day at 1 o'clock online and write.
Ah.
And it's great. We chat for about 5 minutes, and then we all mute ourselves, and you write. And it breaks the isolation. It holds me accountable.
Yeah.
They have 3 of these sessions a day. I just go to 1, and I do it 5 days a week because I try to practice what I preach and still maintain another kind of a life, a private life. And that's been really helpful. And we have continued that past November. So it's still ongoing, and we may form some kind of critique groups. But mostly I have my beta readers. I've got about 5 of them, including my agent.
Uh-huh.
And then with the standalone, I've been working with a woman named Nina Schuyler. I don't know if you know her.
It does sound familiar.
Nina is a literary fiction writer. Just got a nice big award for her book of short stories. And she's been enormously helpful with my standalone novel. And it's been almost like taking a class in writing to work with her.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, she's made me a much better writer, I think.
That's so cool. So this is kind of a dumb question, but I tend to ask these. So if on one of the 5 days that you have something going on at your normal time, will you do one of the other 2 during that day?
No, because one's at 5 o'clock and I'm done at 5 o'clock. I don't have any brain power left. And the other's at 10 p.m. Do you believe that, people? I'm in bed at 10 p.m. So I may just write on my own and miss the 1 o'clock. But no, I don't do that.
How many hours at a time do you guys write?
The group meets just for an hour.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And in terms of my own writing schedule, I'm probably good for 2.5 to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Uh-huh.
I used to be able to do more than that, but that seems to be what I can do. But you know how it is with writers. I mean, I say to people, think it's hard being married to a cop? Try being married to a writer, for heaven's sakes. I mean, I write these books in the middle of the night. I have been working on this plot for the 5th Dot Meyerhoff. I haven't had a good night's sleep in about a week.
Okay.
So maybe I can tell you I work 2 to 3 hours a day, but actually I'm probably working 20 hours a day.
Yeah, I totally get that. Okay, so I know that part of what you've been doing for the past 40 years is speaking engagements. What kind of subject matter? I mean, I know the basic subject matter, but what do you speak about? How do you get these speaking engagements? Are you mostly talking to public safety groups? How does that work?
Well, people will just call me and say, we hear that you're really good at this, or we like your subject matter. The phone call that I just got on a break, that's Dr. Joel Fay, and he's one of the founders of the First Responder Support Network, and he and I do workshops for couples together, and I think it works really, really well to have a man and a woman, to have a civilian, me, and a guy that was a cop for 30 years. He has more cred with the cops in the audience. I have cred with the women, the spouses, because it's mostly women spouses and male officers. So we do those workshops, and they can be anywhere from a couple of hours to a couple of days. I also do self-care for cops and for their families, and I think I mentioned I'll work with clinicians who want to become culturally competent.
Wow. Do you have like a private practice? I mean, are there hours that you will see clients?
Not anymore, not except from my work at the First Responder Support Network. That's all the clinical work that I do.
So there was a time, though, that you actually would see individuals?
Oh, yes.
And were you getting a lot of spouses during that time period?
Yeah, sure. Spouses and officers themselves.
Officers.
Yeah. But I wanted to devote much more time to writing, and that's why I closed my practice out at that point. And I like what I'm doing. I like working at this retreat because I like working as part of a team, working with first responders who are peer supporters, working with chaplains, working with another clinician. We have about a 3-to-1 ratio of staff to client, and I really think that's so effective. And I like sharing the responsibility. I just like working together with other people. I don't like being isolated in my office.
Yeah, and when this whole pandemic ends, do you still see yourself doing some of these different things that you've been doing for all these years? I mean, I know you want to focus on writing, but will you do a combo of a lot of writing and maybe some speaking engagements, or will you hang those up?
Well, I may hang up the speaking engagements. Sometimes they're lucrative, but again, the travel and the prep work and things that are local, I think I will continue to do. I want to stay with the retreat, the first responder support retreat, for as long as I'm physically able to do it. It's physically quite taxing to work that many hours and get that little sleep. And then I will, of course, I think I would just want to keep devoting my time to writing. I'm often asked to write for law enforcement journals or to write for psychological journals, but I have become a little more, I think, properly selfish. I'm just going to write for myself, not for other people.
Okay. So I've got two more questions.
Okay.
One is, do you already have an idea of what you'll be doing after Dot 5 and the standalone?
Dot 6.
Okay. And my last question is, have you had any contact, any interest at all from TV or movie studios?
Not really. I think my agent thought that might happen, and some other people thought that the whole concept was really quite interesting.
Yeah.
But nothing has ever panned out. I think it rarely pans out for writers, but
absolutely true. Yeah. I mean, we've talked to so many authors who have gotten some bite. One even. The actor that was going to play his central character, he got to meet him, kind of a big name actor in Hollywood. And even that didn't work out.
Right.
So we know that it's pretty rare.
Yes, it is. It is.
Great. Okay. So before we sign off, I'm going to do a little bit of trivia.
Okay.
I think that's pretty interesting stuff, but that's because I'm the one saying it. Okay. I thought this was a kick. Stephen King, and I'm reading them because it's too hard to paraphrase. Stephen King was once taken for a vandal in an Australian bookshop where he was secretly signing copies of his books. A customer in the shop noticed a man walk in off the street and start signing books, and unaware that it was King, she notified the store staff. I love this stuff. The misunderstanding was eventually cleared up, and 5 of the 6 books were given to community groups for fundraisers. The other book was purchased by the customer.
You asked me before about where do I learn to write?
Yeah. Stephen
King's book on writing has got to be up there, #1 book to read if you're interested in the craft. It's fabulous.
I have heard that on numerous occasions. Yeah, I've heard his book is fantastic.
It is.
And by the way, his 11/22/63 novel is one of my favorites of all time.
Oh.
Have you read it?
No.
Amazing book.
Wow.
It's about somebody in the present that goes through a portal to the late 50s and tries to prevent the assassination of JFK. Ergo 11/22/63. The book is so plausible. Everything that happens after you accept the premise, you absolutely believe that it could happen.
Wow.
Plus, he made an ending that was appropriate and great instead of screwing it up by being cheesy. Okay. Teddy Roosevelt, while president, read a book a day and sometimes 2 to 3 if he had a free night a day. And one of his influences was John James Audubon, which made him so interested in preserving the natural beauty. And of course, he did national parks and all that stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool. F. Scott Fitzgerald's This Side of Paradise, which was written in 1920, has the first recorded use of wicked as a word for cool. And also contains the first known appearances of the words t-shirt and daiquiri. Okay, that's all I got. It's so great to see you again anyway, but this was fascinating. I wish we had another half hour just to talk about some of the experiences that you've had and some of the situations that you've encountered, but maybe next time.
Oh, well, maybe next time. I'm delighted to be here. You do a lot of good for writers, and we are all appreciative of what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, K-Cat, as usual. You guys are fabulous, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
You just heard Lit with Lloyd here on KCAT Radio. Explore all our KCAT original programming at kcat.org/radio.